This may not be much of a surprise as somebody who talks about horror movies on the internet and has a cynical sense of humor, but I really like the cinema snob.
That's a dick!
Brad Jones has been putting out videos online for practically a solid decade, and his out-of-left-field references and his dedication to his uptight critic character have really made him stand out among a sea of online reviewers.
What's happening?
It was a law in the 70s that either the term "what's happening" or "good times" had to be used in a movie. Now they're off to have 50s sex, and they're done.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! This movie's got sex in it, too?
So this movie, criticized for its graphic violence, also has sex? Well, now how are the kids supposed to see it?
He's probably responsible for most of my exposure to different weird subgenres of horror throughout the years, but at the end of 2010, he gave a list of his non-ironic favorite movies of the year, and he described just how much he loved I Saw the Devil. And it was enough for me to check it out on Netflix as soon as it hit it, and I was blown the hell away. I Saw the Devil tells the story of a man whose wife is brutally murdered by a serial killer. Unbeknownst to the killer, however, the man is a Secret Service agent with access to advanced training and tracking methods. He easily finds the man responsible, deciding to torture him over an extended period of time rather than killing him outright. Every time he lets him go, he leaves him a little bit more damaged and crazed, causing more bodies along the way and more families torn apart and destroyed. Until he finally decides enough's enough, he corners him and puts an end to his reign of terror once and for all.
난 네가 죽은 후에도 고통스러웠으면 좋겠다.
I've never gone too into detail about Asian horror on this show, even though it's given us a slew of classics. The original Ring, Grudge, and The Eye are all really well done. And I like pretty much anything that Takeshi Miike puts his name on for the most part. But when it comes right down to it, I don't know a lot about the genre. I've seen more than a handful that I could talk about in the future, like Audition, which I would probably consider my favorite, even though it's completely destroyed my trust in dating services for years to come. And I've also seen some obscure ones like House, which is kind of like if the Amityville Horror was rewritten by a mental case coming off of an acid trip. But this one is so good and so dark that I had to mention it. If we're being honest, this is more of a revenge thriller than it is a horror slasher film. It's even got a couple scenes that transition into flat-out action fight sequences, but unlike a regular action film which pumps you up full of adrenaline during the fight scenes and gets you amped for more, this one is so disturbingly paced and backscored that it makes the entire watch undeniably uncomfortable. I mean, I like karate as much as the next guy, but the fights are always used to break up some sort of sexual assault or murdery goings-on. So with that in mind, I guess there's no better place to start with this story than with the killer himself.
이걸 어떻게 해줘야 그 새끼가 씨발 바짝 약이 오르려나? 응? 이렇게 해줘야 약이 오르려나? 이렇게?
If you recognize that actor, he's the same guy who starred in Old Boy, another absolutely brilliant and psychologically mind-destroying of a film. I'm not going to try and pronounce any names here because it would be so off the mark for everything that it would be distracting, so I'm just going to refer to the killer as Old Boy, and I'm going to refer to the protagonist of this story as Storm Shadow, because that's what I know him from. Anyway, Old Boy is a career killer and a ruthless, creepy-as-hell character. I've seen a lot of movies, and there are few people I would put on a pedestal of being a more despicable human being than him. Maybe Freddy Krueger, possibly Mick Taylor from Wolf Creek, but that's about it.
임신했다고 살려달라고. 알고 있었냐?
Every scene he is in amps up the tension and brings back up the question, can he be a worse person? Just before he answers it right away.
저기 이쪽으로 오세요. 처방 좀 받아가셔야죠.
There is this guy chasing him throughout the entire movie, and he still takes time away from it to be just a perfect evil prick. Now, that's not to say if you compare them side by side that the protagonist is more sympathetic, because after the first few minutes on screen, you find out that he's just as despicable and absolutely insane, just to a different degree. After his fiance's body is found, he immediately drops into this horrible trance where all he can think about is revenge. He works for basically the Korean equivalent of the CIA, and he spends his bereavement time off of work systematically going after anybody who may be connected with her disappearance. Best 2-week vacation ever. After single-handedly dispatching pretty much every sex criminal on the most wanted list, leading to pretty much my favorite line in the whole movie,
자지를 그냥 망가뜨려야지. 야, 말이 되는 소리야. 야, 임마, 네 자지 누가 그랬어?
he finds the man who's responsible for killing his wife fairly quickly, and he immediately takes advantage of the control he has over him. The pattern basically goes like this, and it's repeated several times. He beats him nearly to death, he puts a tracker in him, and then he patches him up and lets him walk away. Alright, maybe walk away isn't the best way to put it.
고개 돌리고 귀도 막고.
There are certain things that I'll never be okay to sit through in a film setting. One of them is any scene where somebody has their tendon sliced. And this one is probably the worst I've ever seen. Did I mention that this is uncomfortable to sit through? Because it is. So if you need something to help you get through this movie, if it feels like it's weighing too much on you, you could focus on the few moments of black comedy. Like this cannibal trying to free himself from being nailed to the table. Or maybe it's the fact that he is the single craziest bastard on the planet, but old boy still calls everybody around him a crazy bastard.
완전 개사이코네. 미친 새끼다. 병신 새끼.
But the one thing that kind of helps me remove my brain from the gritty, terrifying realism that this movie portrays is just how awesome and terrible at the same time Storm Shadow is at his job. You get the feeling that if he wasn't blinded by rage, he'd be the greatest secret agent ever. He is a master of hand-to-hand combat. He never seems troubled by the situation he finds himself in. He always has a plan. There's also the fact that every time Old Boy thinks he has a moment to himself, Storm Shadow bursts in like he's the Braun Strowman of Korean revenge flicks. I'm not finished with you! But that's just the thing. His emotions completely cloud his judgment, which is what leads to his downfall. His extended family, who are surprisingly cool with him doing this in the first place, beg him to stop before somebody else gets hurt.
그만두는 게 어떨까? 아니, 저기 이제 그만큼 했으니까 그만뒀으면 좋겠어.
And it's his inability to let go that causes them all to be slaughtered.
어떠냐? 이제 느낌이 와? 그러길래 왜 그렇게 지랄 떨면서 댐비나 댐비기를 이 겁대가리 막가지 새끼야.
Because as the old saying goes, fool old boy once, shame on you. Fool him 3 consecutive times, leading to a broken arm, a sliced tendon, multiple concussions, tacks in the feet, and the worst case of indigestion a person can ever have. Shame on you. In a way, you can't help but hate the protagonist for everything he's doing. He's letting a killer go. His actions are immediately resulting in more people being hurt, objectified, or killed. His family knows what he's doing and is constantly telling him that it's time to stop, and he just doesn't listen. Probably because every time he wants to, he just looks back to when they found his wife's head floating in the river, and he is shocked back into that rage. One more thing that I found kind of darkly funny. I don't know how accurate this is, but the press in this movie are absolute dicks. Oh my god, there's a head! It belongs to somebody whose father and fiancé are in direct view of this camera. Quick, get as many pictures as possible and box them out of the frame. And if you don't want to focus on the horrible stuff for a minute, you can take in the beautiful cinematography, because the way this movie is filmed is so well done. Some of the shots in this film are breathtaking. One of my absolute favorites is when he's looking through suspects and he goes to sleep. That one shot shows how comfortable he is with what he's doing, how knowing that he's attacking these people doesn't cause him to lose sleep, but he will not stop until he finally finds the person responsible. But this is my absolute favorite. It's one single pan around a cab, shot after Old Boy is picked up.
그나저나 여기서 차단열 고생하셨죠? 여긴 야간에서 차단인 것도 보기 힘든 데거든요.
In the space of just a few moments, you realize along with the character that he is not the first person to be picked up that night. That the man driving the cab is not the actual driver, which means that they stole that cab. They probably did terrible things to that driver, maybe killed him. And now he's gonna be next. And if you know Old Boy by this point in the film, he handles it pretty much as responsibly as you'd expect him to. That 360 shot, I live for shots like that in great movies. So throughout the entire film, the two characters trade barbs back and forth. They wreck each other's lives in increasingly horrible ways until finally, enough is enough. The killer is trapped and he is made to suffer in one of the best scenes I have ever seen in any movie, anywhere.
말해봐. 무서워. 네가 나 여태까지 데리고 나온 거 같지? 에? 적가고 있네.
Even with no place to run, nothing in his mind to lose, no help in sight, Old Boy laughs at his pain and does not back down from who he is or what he's done. He is, in this film's universe at least, as pure and evil as you could ever hope to find. And he makes sure that Storm Shadow knows it.
그러니까 난 이미 졌어. 알아?
And so, in probably the only way that this movie could end, he is killed by his own tools that he used to take care of the bodies that he took apart. The body is found by his family. Storm Shadow finally takes out the earpiece that he had been using to talk to him and taunt him the entire way through and breaks down, finally having finished his goal. The Aristocrats. This movie takes a lot out of you. Like, a lot. But it is still definitely worth watching. It combines all the best elements of revenge fantasy flicks with those of traditional slasher films. Maybe not the supernatural ones like Freddy or Jason, but more the ones that seem oddly familiar and realistic, like Last House on the Left. Its main characters are complex and engaging while still being repulsive and downright vicious. Its direction is flawless, mixing brutal moments of violence with beautifully crafted camera shots. And for a movie that takes place over a ton of different scenes and variety of landscapes, it manages to stay intimate, focusing on only 2 or 3 people on screen at a time. I absolutely love this movie despite how awful and dirty it makes you feel on the inside. And you could argue that it is not really a horror film. To which I have just this to say. This film feels so gritty and so realistic, there is a possibility that something like this could have actually happened. And I don't think there is anything scarier than that.
점점 끔찍해질 거야. 재밌네.
Think we may have gone a little too heavy with this one. So next time, let's do a comedy.
Seen down in the back street corner, it's not for a beautiful day. I see you